Welcome to Real Talk on Islam Live, where we will bring in our panelists who in the first half of the show will discuss interesting theological topics from the perspective of Islam. And in the second half, they will answer your questions. Our topic today is, what is a soul?
We've just met, but we have something in common. We've both been obsessed with consciousness our whole lives. I did a PhD in neurophysiology, and I don't think I understood consciousness anymore when I finished the degree than when I started the degree. Why is consciousness so baffling?
Because it's everything we have, all we are. So when I need to talk about consciousness, like now, I always say, what is it first, so we understand what it is. And as I said, it is everything. I define it as what goes away in the evening when you go to sleep and comes back the next morning when you wake up. And sometimes it comes back during the night when you dream. Meaning, if it weren't there, for each of us, there would be nothing at all. In fact, none of us would exist in a fundamental sense.
So why do some philosophers claim that consciousness is an illusion?
That is something best left to themselves, because as I will always emphasize, this consciousness that I have an experience right now is the only thing we are absolutely sure of.
So is how can the brain explain the mind? Why is the output of the brain the mind? And many different theories from neuroscientists, most of whom believe that the firing of electrical impulses, the flow of chemicals across synapses between the neurons, in some sense, maybe gross electrical activities across brain areas. In some sense, the activities of the neurons themselves, circuitry, whole brain areas. In some sense, consciousness is a product of all of that. That's their assumption, but they never, ever make any progress on what it feels like in terms of the inner experience. So the process from going from brain to mind is a difficult one.
It is important to study the brain, but you will never squeeze the essence of consciousness out of gray matter. You can squeeze it as a sponge as much as you want. You will never get experience flowing out of it because suddenly there is some special property of the neurons firing at 40 hertz or whatever else that might be that suddenly generates experience. And this is why philosophers have rightly pointed out for a long time that this is a very hard problem. In fact, it is so hard that I grant you it is impossible to solve that way. You cannot solve the problem of consciousness by looking at the brain, taking it in your hands, and asking yourself, how could this piece of gray matter give rise to the phantasmagory, and the colors, and the beauty, and the shapes of experience? You will not squeeze it out of that.
Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you. Welcome to Real Talk on Islam Live. This is our first episode. Today we will be discussing what is a soul. I'm your host, Ahmed Khan, and we have a panelist, Ghulam Rabi Saab. He and I will be discussing this topic in depth. His background is in finance, international business. He's part of the National Outreach Department of the USA. And he is a student of comparative religion, and both him and I will be discussing the concept of the soul from the perspective of Islam. We will use the Holy Quran and a book called The Philosophy of the Teachings of Islam. This book was written by Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian, the Promised Messiah, peace be on him. He wrote this as an essay in 1896 for the Conference of Great Religions, and he answered several questions around our existence, and he spoke at length on the topic of the soul. So without further ado, we're going to get into the discussion of the soul. The first thing I think that comes to mind, Ghulam Rabi Saab, is that what is a soul? There is a Quranic verse that is very straightforward in answering this question, and it's Quran chapter 17, verse 86. It basically says, "And they asked thee concerning the soul. Say the soul is by the command of my Lord, and of the knowledge thereof you have been given but a little. What do you make of what the Quran is talking about, like the words command of my Lord and the knowledge of very little? Rabisa.
Excellent. First of all, it is a true honor to be part of this first episode. I'm truly humbled by this experience to talk about the soul. This verse of the Holy Quran primarily talks about the fact that God created soul out of nothing, and is created in the womb of a mother in the form of a light. And in the book Philosophy, the founder of Ahmadiyya Muslim Community explains that. What is important, the second part of the verse, which is you have knowledge but a little. This was addressed to the disbelievers who had little knowledge of the soul, pointing to the fact that if you want to know about soul, you have to point to the Holy Quran, to the Holy Prophet, because they are given the full comprehension of the soul. So in essence, it gives you part of the answer, and then makes you rely on the teachings of the Holy Quran and the scriptures to understand the meaning of soul.
So a couple of things here. The Quran is saying things like the command of my Lord, which in the commentary section of the Quran, you can see that it's something that is created out of nothing, matter, not from matter, previously created matter. And number two, the promised Messiah, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, peace be on him, says that a soul is a fine light developed inside the body. So what is he talking about in that respect?
The essence he talks about of the soul is already present in the sperm. When the sperm meets the ovum and forms a zygote, that forms a chemical reaction that forms this light, which is born in the womb of the body. It's not something introduced from external. It's not eternal. It is created in the womb of the body, and by the command of God. And that's where Allah says that, this verse that we're talking about. So that phenomenon, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Interesting enough, 1400 years ago, the Holy Quran uses the word nufta for sperm, and yet it was discovered much later in 1700s.
You're actually right about that. The actual discovery of the sperm was in 1677 by the scientist Anton von Leeuwenhoek, creator of the microscope as well, or developer of the microscope, and he discovered this in the process of looking through to his own bodily fluids, and he found that these nanomolecules within this bodily fluid that he was kind of embarrassed because it's at that time things were a little different, so he didn't want to publish the results, but he kind of asked the leadership, the political leadership, that I want to publish these results. It's very interesting. So it's interesting how the Quran had mentioned this hundreds of years before the actual discovery of the sperm. The other thing I wanted to kind of highlight, is obviously I did not mention this, is Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian, the promised Messiah, was the founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community. He founded the community in 1889. Just to give you the platform of the community and what his purpose was, he was a claimant to the promised Messiah in the latter days. So with that being said, could you kind of when the promised Messiah says its essence is present in the sperm, could you kind of elaborate that a little bit? What does he mean by that?
The essence that he talks about, and then he also mentions that the relationship between the body and the soul, or the way it's attached, he gives a metaphor that how the flame is related to the flint. It's not part of the flint, but it's developed out of the flint. It's a separate entity. So it's kind of a chemical reaction you can talk about. In scientific term, when two materials meet, and then you basically have an energy that is formed, something to that extent. But the delicate relationship is there's always a lot of mystery around it.
So when you hit a flint with something hard, you see sparks flying out. The energy is not within the matter. It's just being released with the reaction of what happened. So it's a catalyst that creates it. It's not the actual thing that's within the matter. From the matter.
The God. Yes, that's where it comes.
And it's also interesting how when scientifically speaking, when you see the sperm has to be guided into the egg because of a protein called Juno, which is a receptor on the egg, and it allows it to locate where to infuse the DNA. And then obviously after the fertilization of the egg, the 23 pairs of chromosomes of the sperm and the 23 pairs of chromosomes in the egg then combine together to formulate the final zygote, or the fertilized egg. And then thus the process of life begins. And so it's interesting that that mysterious time frame is where this is all happening, and it's already set up in the structure. So we'll go to our second point that we wanted to discuss today. It's what is the body-soul relationship? Islam talks a lot about that in the Holy Quran, and the promised Messiah, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, speaks on them, peace be on him, speaks on this issue in his book, The Philosophy of the Teachings of Islam. So the Quran says, there is a verse, the Quran states in chapter 91, verses 8 through 11, that and by the soul and its perfection, and he revealed it to the ways of evil and the ways of righteousness, he indeed truly prospers who purifies it, and he who corrupts it is ruined. So what is this concept of purification and corruption, Ghulam Rabi Sahib?
Yes, to point out, whatever Promised Messiah said was always based on the Holy Quran and the Hadith, so something that he elaborates on. And that also points to the fact of why we have a format in prayers, why we have a format in religion, because everything in our body affects the soul. He goes on to elaborate, our action, eating, drinking, sleeping, walking, moving around, resting, bathing. So that's why Islam has guidelines about how to do everything so that you can purify your soul. Again, the opposite is true. One of the very important things that also to keep in mind that gives a new scientific perspective of religion, that whatever we are doing, whatever action, a smile is a charity, it's affecting your soul.
It doesn't contradict the science.
It doesn't. It gives more light, in fact, to the science is giving more light, and vice versa. It complements each other. Science is the work of God, and religion is the word of God. There is no contradiction.
So in essence, it is a living religion, because we are trying to look at our physical actions, the everyday actions that we do, and how we carry them out, because they are indirectly affecting the soul from the perspective of Islam. Could you go into the idea of the movements of the soul and how it follows the body? Promised Messiah, peace be on him, mentions this in the book too, as well, on page 14. What is he talking about?
He is saying that the movement of the soul follows the movement of the body. If the body is drawn in a particular direction, the soul follows. And of course, scientifically, right now, we know the concept of solitron and how that's done. So having said that, this is, again, religion always precedes, just like the definition of, we're talking about sperm, been discovered in 17th century, and Holy Quran talked about it in 1400 years ago. Similarly, the same thing, he's giving us pointers from Allah's guidance where, how the soul is related to the body. And of course, we'll talk about solitron a little bit later.
Absolutely. To give a highlight of what that is, what Rabi Saab is talking about, there is a small video we're going to play where the fourth Khalifa, Hazrat Mirza Ahmad, may Allah have mercy on him, talks about the description of a soliton, which is an interesting scientific phenomenon. So we're going to play that video now.
The physicists themselves discovered the existence of solitons. They are a package of forces electric forces, wave force, whatever you call them, but they are a package of forces, bundle of forces, which survives independently itself without matter being its container. This was the most mind-boggling thing they discovered. And I read some articles on this issue. First of all, let me describe what soliton is. You know, when you see a boat being driven, whether by motor or by mechanical means like horses sometimes drag a boat behind. In America it often happens. You see a pattern of waves being left behind the boat. Spreads in all directions. When the moment the boat stops, that pattern does not continue ahead of the boat. It always spreads behind the boat. In itself it's a bundle of forces which is directly related to the material existence of boat and its forward motion. One day an American saw with strange surprise, he was wonderstruck in fact, when he was dragging a boat behind his horse, and at a corner he stopped for a while and he looked at the pattern which started moving ahead of boat. The boat had stopped. The bundle of energy remained exactly the same bundle of energy which was created by that reality of boat. It moved on. He immediately reported it to some scientists, and they started investigating, and they discovered that he was not a liar. It is possible.
So there you have the definition of what a soliton and the sort of the metaphorical representation of how the soul is interacting with the body, the way that the promised Messiah Islam has explained that it follows the movements of the body as if it retaining the attributes of the physical matter. We're going to go into our third point now, and this is where it gets a little more interesting. And the question is, where does our soul go after we die or when we sleep? Now, scientifically speaking, in the video, the scientist had mentioned that once you go to sleep, the consciousness goes away. That's according to the measurements what they have acquired so far and data. And also that the only point in time within the state of sleep the consciousness comes back is when the person is in REM state or in a dreaming state. Mostly it's in the REM state where you dream vividly. And the activity is not just there, but it's mimicking as if the person is alive, someplace awake. Yes. Just the way that our consciousness is reacting to the sensory perceptions in our everyday life. So it's interesting the way that that's created. So the Quran has a verse, chapter 39, verse 4. Allah takes away the souls of human beings at the time of their death, and of those also that are not yet dead during their sleep. And then he retains those against which he has decreed death and sends back the others till an appointed term. It's an interesting phenomenon that's happening. Can you elaborate further on this regarding the teachings of the promised Messiah, peace be on him?
Yes, the teachings of Islam is amazing. This verse, if you think about it, the constant is soul. What the Holy Quran is describing sleep as a sister of death. That the soul leaves the body during sleep, and of course, when person dies. Interestingly enough, that proves the existence of soul. If you think about it, when you dream in your sleep, you dream about sometimes past events, just like Freud mentioned. Sigmund Freud mentioned in Interpretation of Dreams that your natural psychic phenomenon, whatever you went through, you kind of see that in your dream. But what about the events that's happening in the future? Things that are well documented. We see the religious scriptures, the story of Yusuf. He saw, early in what's going to happen in his future with him and his brothers. Even in our personal life, I mean, I have went through experiences where, I was worried about the grade of exam, and God told me, who told the soul what's going to happen in the future? That phenomenon, and many
And
people have
there's some connection somewhere.
Absolutely.
That's connecting that type of data coming in or information with the concept that we understand soul to be. Could you go into the topic of where it resides when we go to sleep, or just the idea after our death, for instance, the concept of barzakh?
Yeah, barzakh in Islam is similar to the Christian philosophy. We have purgatory, which is the life in between this life and the hereafter. Soul cannot live without a body. So in the barzakh life, in this same book, the Promised Messiah explains that takes a temporary body, and the shape of the body or the color of the body will be the actions a person does. Your account closes, and you essentially, whatever you have a good person, you have a body of light. If you have a person who have not done good activities, then you have a dark body, and then this particular body experiences whatever the body experiences, your action, your soul experience through that body. So this is a temporary until, of course, you go for resurrection, and that's after barzakh.
And it connects with what we've already said, that the health of the soul is important, because if it is in another existence inside another body, it would affect that body as well. So we need to understand the whole thing holistically and get the bigger picture of what we are looking at, as opposed to the microcosmic picture that we look at about our individuality and things of our nature, of what we're doing in this physical world, and nothing outside of this physical world. Especially when even the scientists are saying that consciousness is not there with the physical connection, right? So we have to understand it in a bigger way. In fact, the fourth Khalifa, Hazrat Mirza Tahir Ahmad, may Allah have mercy on him, had said that the place that it probably resides is outside of our four-dimensional reality, and that is the three-dimensional space and the fourth dimension being time. And it could possibly even be in the fifth or sixth dimension. And just briefly knowing the current understanding of modern physics, these dimensions are so small, they're imperceptible to our physical beings and our physical senses, and probably need to travel at a very high speed to even understand where these are, because they are in such smaller time scales. So it is at another, they are at another realm, probably with an outside force taking care of that, which obviously could be the connection, what we are looking for, which is God in our case. So I think we're gonna play a video that's kind of encapsulate our discourse here, and then we'll take some questions. Hopefully we have a few minutes left, and we will take questions on the conversation. So we're going to play this next video, which is a sort of like a recap of everything that we just discussed from the perspective of Hazrat Mirza Tahir Ahmad, may Allah have mercy on him.
Regarding the connection of the soul with the brain.
That is a very interesting question, the relationship of soul to brain. In fact, this is a hotly debated question in the top scientific world. Many scientists who are directly concerned with this question are nowadays debating it. The whole issue started with Dr. Eccles' observations, who is known to be father of the modern knowledge of nervous system. In fact, he is the inventor, he is the discoverer of certain things which have revolutionized the concept of man about nervous system. So he is the last word on it, a Nobel laureate as well. He first of all observed that mind is different and brain is different. And Dr. Eccles categorically refutes his theory and says, I am a man of this field. I have operated upon brains, and I have spent the whole lifetime on the study of brain and nervous system. And from my experience, I can positively say that brain is not all. There is something which we cannot define, which is called mind, and it is superior to brain. And something ethereal maybe, we can't give it a place where it resides, but it's something different than the material phenomena of brain. Now, this is what the religious people say is called soul. And these doctors also mention it. What we call mind, they say, may be what the religious people refer to as soul, or as vital power, or energy, or atma. And so many words are used by different people using different terminology. But one thing is established, that the time is gone when the scientists used to attack the possibility of existence of mind as distinct from brain. Now they are taking a pedal in favor of religion, with the grace of Allah now. And now the scientists are compelled to bow their head to them because they know the language, they know the art, and they know the science how to defend what they say, what they believe in.
So that basically encapsulates today's discourse. We're taking any questions or comments that you may have while you were listening to us talk about this topic. You can post them in the live chat area. We will see it, and we'll try to respond to it as appropriately as possible. Given the time limit we have about a few minutes. But this topic is a vast topic, so Rabi Saab, do you have anything to add? What we've just and as we see the comments, we'll try to post them. Do you have anything to add to our discourse?
Yeah, 2 points. One is when Mirza Tahir Ahmed, His Holiness, talked about the dimension, it was based on a hadith. Someone came to Holy Prophet ﷺ and said, if the expanse of the heaven is throughout the whole universe, where is hell? And Huzur, Holy Prophet ﷺ said, is in the same place. That conception of dimension is already embedded in Islam, and that's what His Holiness expounded. And one thing I wanted to also mention, the last point I wanted to mention about soul, is like, when we experience happiness or pain, people touch their heart. They don't touch their head, naturally. And that kind of tells you there's other phenomenon. Although the brain is controlling your body, but there's an operator for the brain, a mind that is a soul. That's it's not the brain. The owner is something else, and that's something I guess we started with the scientific explanation and also the religious explanation. Both are talking about the same thing, a same phenomenon from different perspective.
Yes, and that's a great point. And I just want to read you one comment. In my view of life as a human on this planet, it is a link between matter and energy. And I think that's a great point, that link is the most important thing between this life and the hereafter. So it's not something that we're imagining that something is going to happen afterwards. It's something that's very much interlinked right now. It's like the womb example is that when the baby's in the womb, it's still a life that eventually will link back to when it's born. That whatever is happening inside the womb is also going to affect it after its birth. So similarly, we are in that situation. So we're going to close this discourse because unfortunately we are limited by time with our discourse. And the book that I wanted to mention was The Philosophy of the Teachings of Islam. It's on different platforms, Barnes & Noble's Audible. And so there are different URLs that are being posted in the chat. You can look at those to get further information on our today's topic. So we thank you very much to attend our first show today. Hopefully many more. In the next episode, we will be discussing how food affects our spirituality. So thank you. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Well, that was the conclusion of our episode 1, What is a Soul? Thank you for joining us today as we had an in-depth discussion on the topic of the soul. We hope you enjoyed it. Please join us next on September 12th at the same time where we discuss if food affects our spirituality. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel below for the notifications of future shows.